So let's go ahead and start. So go ahead and give us your name and what it is you do.
Mario Mendelara.
Okay, and you work for what company?
I work for the Walt Disney Company
And
here in Orlando.
And what is it you do?
I'm legal counsel in their in-house legal group.
Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to ask you a couple questions. About 30 questions, all related to work and what it is you like about it. What things are like for you on a daily basis. What's the hardest, things, just general questions, right?
All right.
Okay, so could you describe for me just a typical work day?
Typical work day. You usually have 2 or 3 meetings scheduled. You walk, you get in, you do your calls, and the calls involve, advising our internal clients, so which would be other Disney people who have other groups, and they might have some legal questions, or they have a legal problem, or they're negotiating a difficult contract and trying to work with them to get them to either get the deal done or solve the problem or come up with an interesting solution to their problem. The rest of the day is dealt with, for me personally, I do a lot of contract drafting. So I do a lot of work on the computer, drafting contracts, reading contracts, cutting and pasting, and all sorts of fun things.
A lot of legal work.
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of skills are required in your position for these kinds of things? What are the type of things that you learned in school that you use on a daily basis?
I think the ability to read and understand quickly, and parse language in a very certain way. The way a lawyer would read a document is a little different than most other people, and you kind of have to read a paragraph or a sentence and try to figure out what's not being said.
Right. Versus what should be said.
Yeah, and what should be said. So it takes a lot of reading, and then a lot of communication skills. So it's kind of translating that into regular English so that you can talk to your client. Yeah,
right. Because as a customer, whatever you guys work over in Team Disney, then it comes down to us. Like, say anything that you guys negotiate with the union. As far as I know, right now they're discussing some extra hours hotline situations going on where customers can't pick up double overtime shifts. So that's being negotiated. So whatever goes on there, you guys translate it into layman's terms, basically. Okay, cool. What parts of your job do you find the most challenging?
Challenging, I think sometimes you have very quick deadlines. So sometimes there's an emergency contract and they need to get the contract done by tomorrow morning, and you kind of have to kind of scramble and drop everything and do that kind of thing. And I think in a large company like Disney, the other challenge is sort of wrangling all the different people that need to sign off on something on the same call or in the same room, and have them make a decision at the same time, or remind them that they already gave us the go ahead, and that
make sure everybody's on the same page.
On the same page, and in a place like Disney, you have too many.
Trust me, I know. To get everybody on the same page is a task itself. So, okay. What part of your job do you find the most enjoyable?
I like solving it. I like being able to get the deal done, or find the solution that everyone's happy with. So that gives you a lot of satisfaction when you do that.
And I'm sure that things like that, like coming to a solution where all parties can agree on it, that can be sort of a difficult task. So I can see why the enjoyment comes from that. What do you think you use on a daily basis to get to that point? As far as getting everyone together, what do you think really works to make that happen?
I think it's listening to what the other side or the other person is saying, and then distilling that to 2 or 3 things that they really want, and then try to figure out what you really want is 1, 2, and 3. All this other stuff really shouldn't bother you.
Yeah, it's like meeting in the middle.
It's negotiating and trying to figure out what are the most important things for each of the parties concerned.
Compromise.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. In your line of work, like in any other, I'm sure there's things that drive you crazy. Like anything negative about your job, what would be something that stands out to you? Which I'm sure is hard because working for Disney.
Working for Disney is great, and I've only been there for a year, so it hasn't really bothered me all that much.
Feel free to draw from previous companies as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes when people don't listen, so if you tell somebody, hey, when you send me these papers, don't do it in this way.
Right.
And they just keep doing the same thing over
Yeah.
and over again. And so, when people don't sort of internalize the advice that you're giving them.
Right. That miscommunication gets.
Yeah, and then you're like, okay, well, I've already told you not to do this, and yet you're still doing it.
Yeah. That can be frustrating in and out of work, so I understand that.
Right.
And as a lawyer, paralegal, anywhere, basically in any field where it's a profession, the work hours can be pretty crazy. So in an average week, what kind of hours do you work?
I think here at Disney it's pretty tame. I mean, I think I usually work from like 9 to 6:30. Not too bad. At a law firm, however, you do work a lot more, and that could be 9 to 8. Depending, or later. I mean, I've done all nighters. It depends on where you are
Right.
in certain cycle of the deal. You could definitely put an all nighter where you're there when the sun rises, and you have to stay there till the very next day.
Wow.
And then there were weekends, or you take home work with you, so you come home, have a little dinner,
And get right
and
back
then
to it.
go back into the home office, do a little bit of work. But that's at a law firm. My experience here as an in-house attorney is a lot different. It's not exactly 9 to 5,
But it's close enough.
but it's closer. The weekends have been fine, and once in a while I might have to do something at home, but it's
not something that like you need to stay on until you wake up and.
no
You're
all
done,
nighters,
yeah.
not yet.
So it seems like the kind of environment you study for in college is what you find at work anyway. That doesn't go away, basically. You take the homework with you, you bring it back with you the next morning.
Right.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Considering that you can have a busy week, what time of the year, what season seems to be the busiest for you at work? Based on and like I said, feel free to draw from previous work experiences.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think towards the end of the year it gets a little crazy, or like right before the holidays, because people are trying to get things done before the end of the year. So that gets a little crazy. So I think November, early December gets a little crazy, and then summertime actually you do get. Even though you think people are on vacation, but I think there's a lot of deals that get done
because
sort of that time, because I think people are just more active.
Yeah, people come here, so especially working for Disney, everyone comes here in the summer for vacation. So what they expect to see has to be negotiated before it even hits the park. So I understand that. Do you think it's a growing field? Not just within Disney, but just the law field itself, the field that you work in. Do you think it's a growing field? Do you think it's constant?
I think it's pretty static. Although things are getting more complex, it's interesting. I don't know I don't know for sure, because I know there's been a contraction a little bit because of the economy. And I think things have come back in a way. But I think long term, it's growing because things are just getting more complex. But it's not like going gangbusters.
Right. I mean, people say that the professions that will never die out is medicine, law, and I guess law enforcement, things like that. That kind of profession never dies.
Right.
So.
The problem there is not so much that, especially as a lawyer, it's that the tuition is so high, and then the starting salaries are not matching. And the demand is not there for you to pay off all the debts that you accumulated, and that's hard for people going into law school now.
Right.
And because they're charging tuition as if everyone's going to come out
successful
and get a top-notch job, and that's just not true.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I know apparently who has her own office. She does freelance work, but she also works for 2 different attorneys. And an attorney actually used to be next to her. He actually had to close his office down after graduating law school. He's retired in New York Police Department. But even though he obtained his law degree and was a working professional, he still had to close his office down. He still owes all the money, not only in the space he rented, but also for the tuition and all the loans he had yet. So that's kind of scary to see, just because most people are told, hey, I want you to be a doctor, I want you to be a lawyer, something with a high-paying profession, so that they not only have that income, but are also able to pay off those loans like they were or the water bill.
Yeah, no, I think with law in particular, if you don't go to the right school, there's a challenge. And then, if you want to make a life as a solo practitioner, it's very, very difficult.
Right. With that in mind, I think I lost track of my question. We'll get back to that. Let's see. Do you think there are too many people entering your profession, or too few then?
Probably too many people are entering a profession that don't know what they're actually
into?
what they're without knowledge of what they're getting into. I think a lot of people go to law as an automatic sort of I'll just I'm a pretty good writer, or I like to argue. That's
Right.
one you hear a lot. I like to argue. I'm gonna go to law school because I want to
I
be
can win
like
cases.
I want to be
basically.
like what's that name in Legally Blonde?
Right, or Harvey Specter.
Yeah, Harvey Specter,
Yeah.
right. And I think it would be better if people go to law school, maybe take a year or two off and work and
Right.
kind of do a little more research and kind of instead of going straight through.
So what you're saying is, do you think someone who's going through law school, probably on the verge of finishing, could take a year or two off? Not only because if you enter that field with your degree, do you think it just becomes work constantly? And do you think somebody would miss out on experiences that at the age of a college student they should experience?
No, I mean more so to go to law you have to do an undergrad and then you do a law degree, which is an extra 3 years on
Right.
top of that. In between that 4-year degree and that 3-year degree, I think like 1 or 2 years off, not off, but working
in that field.
working in any field, just
okay.
being working is good in the sense that you kind of get a better idea of what you like
Okay.
and what you want to do, and then you could decide, do I go to law school? Do I keep my job now? Or,
Right. Okay.
not like after law school, you need to go and be a lawyer.
Right. You kind of see, well, do I want to, get that?
Before you enter the law school, you should know that you want to be a lawyer.
Right. It's like being like a nurse practitioner, where you're basically a doctor, but you don't have a doctor's license. So you do the same kind of work, but
That's if you work as a paralegal. That's a good
right.
job.
So as a
It's a
paralegal,
good job to have in between because you get to work with lawyers and you get to
you see the kind of work
see
they
kind of
do.
what they're doing. You say, hey, do I really want to do this or do I want to go get someone?
Right. Okay. Now thinking about the law field overall, do you think anything has changed dramatically about it in the past 5 years?
It's gotten tougher. It's gotten more more elitist in a way.
Okay.
Right? More,
You gotta be the top dog.
Yeah, and well, not so much. And in not 5 years, I would say in the last maybe 15 years, that's what's happened. If you don't go to the right school and you don't get the top grades, and you might end
People
up.
only want the best.
Yeah, they only want the best, and I think they have the luxury of being able to do that. I think the bigger change, I mean, and this is more than 5 years, but I think the ease that we could draft documents and transmit documents and has made it very not difficult, but has raised expectations
Right.
in terms of how fast you can actually do the work.
Right.
So when you're reading a case or doing a contract, because of the technology now,
That
it's
kind
so
of
much
information.
faster. You
Yeah.
can just and people can do things like in 2 hours, what used to take 2 days.
Wow. That's and keeping that in mind, then what kind of drastic changes do you see happening in 5 years from now in this field?
5 years doesn't feel all that long, but I think eventually, I think the tuitions will start coming down in some places. I think there's going to be sort of 2 tracks. So there's going to be the track where someone's going to go be a Wall Street a Wall Street lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's going to be sort of the local guy who does your real estate closings
Right.
and does your wills and does your domestic violence, that kind
Right.
of lawyer, criminal defense. I think those are going to be 2 different tracks, and I think the good thing would be to have 2 different kinds
Right.
of schools,
Right.
and be more fair.
Right, and that's interesting because a lot of people are doing that where they either go into civil law, corporate law, or criminal law, and
They're all paying the same tuition.
yeah,
Which
they all
doesn't
pay the
make
same
sense.
tuition. Makes no sense because you're learning something that you have no interest in going into. If you want to go into corporate law, then civil litigation isn't going to really do much for you as far as, how do you handle, I guess, property damages I could see being a case. That
Right,
would
but the
be-
difference would be if you want to do criminal justice or public interest stuff,
Right,
there should be school set up for that. Not that so much that the substantive stuff will be different, but the economics are totally different.
Right.
When you get one of those jobs, you're making a quarter of what a Wall Street lawyer is making.
Right. And yet you still pay the same.
You got the same.
So I can see where you're going with that. Okay. So we can have, let's place the notes. Yeah. Let's see. I don't know where the notes are on here.
No, it was in. I think you said there was a message.
Oh, did I? Yeah, that's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see if we change the angle a little bit.
There. All right. Okay. I'm too short.
And then let's try it down here on the pillow. Oh, that's better.
All right.
Okay, go over there. There. Okay.
All right.
Okay, moving on. Let's see. Now, I'm sure in your experience you've seen people come and go out of the field. Why do you think this kind of thing happens? You know, what drives people out of?
Well, I think the economy had a big. People I know who left the field, were asked to leave the field because of the economy. So you had firms that went under,
Right.
because of the the financial crisis, and then firms that drastically cut back on how many people they had, and they got let go, and they either they didn't want to find another law job or they couldn't, and they started looking at other alternative careers.
What would you suggest for someone possibly just laid off to look into without having to pursue a whole nother career and starting with school again?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think is one thing would be to be flexible as to where you're going to work. So consider moving to a city where maybe the market is a little better. Another thing you could do is there's another degree you can get. It's called LLM, and it's particularly useful if you want to do tax law.
Okay.
It allows you you get another degree, and
Right.
so you can takes about a year, and you can kind of hang out for a year, take another class, and then you graduate again, and you're like, you're fresh meat for somebody good.
Interesting. Okay. Just thinking off the top of your head, in this kind of field of work, who do you think are people who are like the big shots, people whose names in the line of work where you, among lawyers, a name that would be big to you, somebody that's kind of
Any Supreme Court justice, right?
Okay.
Any other Supreme Court justice. I think there are people who are seen as sort of leaders academically, like professors,
Right.
kind of are the at the forefront of copyright law, say, or,
Right.
or criminal law. And there's a couple of names that I know there. And then depending on where your firm, when you're at your firm, there's a couple of people there who are very impressive partners who have long careers and worked in government and did not, or handled very high-profile cases. Those are the people that are. But the top notch is being a Supreme Court justice as a lawyer.
Okay. Now let's switch it over, just from work to, I guess, aspiring law students. Thinking back into the years of experience you've had in this field, what kind of people have you met, and based from what you've learned from this field, what do you think are the best attributes you've seen that give off success in this kind of field?
I think the ability to, what I like the people who are able to not so much work on a confrontational, because what I do is a lot of negotiation
Right.
contracts. So I'm not looking to beat the other guy.
Right.
I'm looking to
Win them over.
come to a deal where everybody goes away thinking that they got a good deal.
Right.
And the people who are masters of doing that are really, are somebody that can, at one point be firm and negotiate firm and say, look, I'm not going to take less than this, but at the same time, find a way to finesse it in a way that
Right.
it's like you want to pay
Yeah.
me this.
Right.
It's in your interest to pay
You
me
gotta
this.
plant that idea in their
Plant that
head
idea in
without
their
them thinking.
Right, and those have been the people I think are the best at it. I mean, there are obviously people who think that they can,
Rough it over.
intimidate you over it, and then I'm sure people who are litigators is a totally different kind of
Right.
kind of work. So.
Okay. Now let's go into what it was like before you went into this kind of work. A lot of people choose their jobs based on the monetary value they receive as an income. Is that what pushed you to become what you are today, or did you find another satisfaction in what you do? Something probably emotional, or just as satisfying in the kind of work that gets done?
Yeah, no, I think it's the latter. Because I was doing okay when I was before I went to law school, because law was a second career for me. I was already
Okay.
working as a finance person,
Right.
and it was more the actual work versus the money. Although the money had to be at least what I was making
Right,
before.
of course.
So I was able to maintain what I was making before, and actually did a little better. But now, different coming down here, it's a different market.
Right.
New York and Orlando are two
Two
different
different
markets.
places.
Yeah, it wasn't the money, but it was the money in the sense that I wasn't gonna go down.
Right. Okay. Most people tend to separate their personal lives from their work lives. Being a fan of the kind of music you like and the kind of hobbies you enjoy, shows you watch, do you ever incorporate that into your work, or do you always keep it separate, your business life from your personal life?
I think you make friends. I think you know, especially when you're at a firm, there's a lot of people of the same cohort, same age or whatever, and you can't help but and then you're spending so many hours of the day there
Right.
anyway. You can't help but develop personal relationships, and then even here in the in-house job, you have to talk about something
Right.
during
Talk
lunch.
about
You
legal
can't
work all
just
the
talk
time.
about work all the time,
Right.
or even you can't even just talk about office gossip. People, you
Yeah.
need to share some of your personal life.
Yeah. They say that the people you work with and the people you go to school with are the people who really influence who you are versus your own family, because you spend the majority
More
of time
time.
of the day
Yeah,
with
you're
them.
waking
Yeah.
up.
So
Yeah.
you come home, say hi to everybody, and
Yeah.
go to sleep. So, considering where you are now in your company, do you feel like you still have a chance to move up higher, or do you feel like you've reached the pinnacle of your career?
No, I hope not. I'm fairly low on the totem pole, so yeah, I hope.
Okay. Do you see the possibility arising?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. For someone like myself and others, what do you think could be the best advice you have while we're still in college?
Do a lot of research. I mean, don't figure out what are the jobs that are available to people who go to the schools that you are considering, or to or who've taken the major that you're considering. Find out what other people have done, and this way you can sort of frame what's possible as opposed to what's not possible.
Interesting. Are there days that make you just want to stay home and wish you didn't have to go to work?
I'm not in my new job, so
Okay.
happiest place on earth.
For some people, yeah. Let's see. Now, feel free to not want to answer this question. Obviously, people look at professions like medical careers and law careers as high-paying jobs. What would you say is an average pay, an average salary for someone, say a lawyer, in your field?
In my field, so I think the rates there now. So if you graduate from law school and you go to what they call a big
Right.
law firm, I think in Florida, the starting salary is probably 120. Could be 120. In New York, it's 160.
Right.
And then it just goes from there. Now, as going up from 160 to I think it's like 250 or something like that over the course of 7-8 years. But that's in New York, and
Right.
in Florida, I imagine it's probably a lot less. So maybe from 120, you probably top out at 200. But then when you go in house, you're not at the firm anymore, and so you take a pay cut.
Oh.
Because you're not working as many hours.
Right.
You most typically are making a little bit or a lot less if you're using.
Interesting. Well, yeah, from what
now if you're not at the big law firms, that's the issue, right? Because you might come out and let's say you do public interest. Public interest is not going to pay you more than $30,000, $40,000,
Right.
And yet you have $100,000 of debt. What are you going to do? Or so if you go to work at the DA's office or something, that's government work. You're not making a lot of money.
Right.
So that's where I think a lot of people looking into law should really look at the economics of it and say, this is how much debt I'm going to have. This is the potential income that I can have, if I'm sort of middle of the road, and if I want to go into government. If the numbers don't work,
you can't do it.
It's magic is not going to make it happen. Yeah.
So you're saying what I hear a lot is that people say find a job in something you like to do and you'll never work a day in your life. But the thing is,
it's all work.
Happiness isn't going to pay the rent either.
Right.
So I guess there has to be a compromise between how much you like your work and how much you're receiving for it.
Right.
Okay.
And what's important to you. So
right.
At some point, maybe work is not the most important thing in your life. Maybe
right.
your family is the most important thing in your life.
But also not leaving them in debt is a big thing.
Right. So.
I see. Okay. And now this is a question that I have for you. Considering, not saying you're too high in age, but considering how long ago you were in school and the kind of classes you took now versus the kind of classes the average college student takes to be in this field, what kind of questions do you have from that? Do you wonder if anything's changed? Are you curious about the curriculum we learned, the different classes that are required now versus then?
No, I mean, I was in school, 7, 8 years ago, so it doesn't feel that long ago. But then before that, you're right, it was 20 years ago. I imagine it's pretty much the same. I think the biggest thing that has changed, and I don't know if it's what you do now, but it's the laptops at the computers.
Definitely.
The biggest thing that changed, I think, between my first time in school versus the second time in school, because the first time there was no
Everything
laptops.
was still done by
And then when I went to business school, some people had laptops, but a lot of people didn't. It was like 50-50.
Right.
Now everybody has a laptop.
Right, and it's true. The paralegal I mentioned earlier, she went to school and graduated, but during her course of learning for her paralegal degree, a lot of her work was done by hand. A lot of cases were read out of books that she had to find. She told me about the experiences of having her fight with other students to obtain a book and to search for a case to answer a question. But then they learned, there's actually a database that a lot of lawyers access with all case files on it. So I can see why that's a...
That's the biggest difference.
Yeah, and everything, even now when I write papers APA style, it's complicated in some ways, but just to learn how to reference it, even making your citations is so much faster and easier than it was, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see that happening.
No more Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, no Dewey Decimal. Some kids don't even know what the Dewey Decimal System is.
They don't know. They don't have.
I learned it, but so long ago that it's a faint memory for me. So. Right. But all right, so that about sums up all my questions. So thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
All right.
Anytime.